revenue-based finance for DTC e-coms, it's not the cheapest capital out there, but there's a reason it's not cheap. You give us your documentation, you connect your revenue accounts, we can give you funding in 24 hours. There's no bank that can do that. You want to grow your business? This is one way to do it. This is a way to accelerate growth. We give you this capital, this is how it will pay back, and what you need to do is you need to layer all of that into a financial model. I'm saying a P&L, a balance sheet, and you understand if I make this investment and I turn inventory this quickly, or I make this ad spend and it gets me this revenue, is the capital productive? It's that simple.
Welcome back to a special episode of Chew on This. Today we have CEO and founder of Bloomist, Mike, and CEO of Clearco, Andrew, and we're going to be breaking down invoice funding, talking about financial expertise, and all of the unsexy stuff of building a D2C brand, just so you don't have to. Let's get started with some intros for the few people that don't know Andrew and Mike. Give us a little bit of your background. Give us a little bit about what you're doing today and what you're building, whether it's at Clearco or Bloomist. And then let's jump into what everyone's here to unpack.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. My name's Andrew Curtis. I'm the CEO of Clearco. I've been at Clearco for 2 years. Clearco was founded in 2015, and we are the category creator for revenue-based finance for DTC e-com. So we started this category. 2018 was really when we got it in gear, and we've grown quite a bit since then. And our goal is really to provide working capital for DTC e-coms that are growing very rapidly. And we do that today through our product, which is called Invoice Funding Product.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm Mike Zung. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting. I am the CEO and founder of Bloomist. We started in 2018 as a direct-to-consumer business for sustainable home decor. We work with about 90 different artisan partners from both US and overseas. And in terms of my own background, I come from a digital marketing background. I started with DoubleClick back in the late 90s, became Google. They sent me overseas to Hong Kong. I stayed there for 12 years. Started my own digital agency there and got to know a lot about supply chain, living in Hong Kong and China. It's inevitable. One thing led to another, and I met a family that makes fake flowers, and we were very keen to make them upcycled and recycled fake flowers. Yep. Or we also experiment with biomass plastic like sugarcane. That was kind of the genesis, I guess, of Bloomist. But then really kind of carried it on. I mean, we have a line of planters. We have other sustainable items. We work with artisan partners, like I said, US and overseas.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, again, thank you both for joining us. And I know we have a lot to unpack here, but before we get into invoice funding and whether how Obvi uses it or Bloomist uses it and whatnot, I kind of want to get from your perspective, Andrew, what's going on in this world of funding? What's going on, in this macro economy, and what is the real state of like D2C and funding and that matrix there? Yeah,
sure. Well, I think it's a often challenging environment today. There's a fair amount of macroeconomic uncertainty, and we live in a very high rate environment. So as you know, central banks worldwide have increased rates over a prolonged period of time, and that's made all capital more expensive. And a lot of our customers and many DTC e-coms, they're voracious consumers of capital. They're trying to grow businesses very rapidly, and they have massive working capital requirements. So they have to be very thoughtful about how they fund those working capital requirements, and they're faced with a sometimes dizzying array of financing options, everything from revenue-based finance to equity raising, which of course dilutes their ownership. And so I think today, DTC e-coms are struggling with all of these options. Capital is certainly not as cheap as it used to be, and credit's certainly not as easy. So it's harder to find capital, and our customers, we find like they need the capital. They need to be very thoughtful about what capital they take, the characteristics of the capital. And we like to think of ourselves not only as a capital provider, but as someone who can advise companies very thoughtfully about, well, what should they be doing for what need or use. Sure. And so that's where we focus a lot of our conversations with our customers, because sometimes we may not be the best choice for them, for example.
Right. What do you think is when you look at the market today? And I know a lot of our listeners who are maybe early stage founders or even 7 figures trying to break into 8-figure founders. One question we always get, and I always wonder, is it now one of those things where you have to be a profitable business to be able to unlock some of these tools, or are you guys still edging on the side of like, you know what, if you have path to profitability and some level of historical to show you're profitable, we can work with you? Or is it really just like so custom now more than ever, completely based on the brand?
Yeah, I would say it's probably the last bucket. Plenty of our customers are not profitable. Plenty of them are. We certainly want to see a path to profitability. And as you guys all know, having run your businesses on your own like this, you can have a very good idea, very good product, very good service. You can see profitability and cash flow break even in the future, but you need a way to get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the way to get there is through capital, to fund working capital. So we see a range of levels of profitability across our customers. What we care most about, though, is that whether they're profitable or unprofitable, they're well run.
Yep.
And that the founder or the people running the finance department or the business, they know what they're trying to achieve, they have a plan to achieve it, and the plan is credible. Because obviously when we send out capital, we want it to come back so we can fund additional businesses in the future.
Makes sense. Makes complete sense. Michael, it'd be great to kind of get a segue on understanding in your journey since 2018. I know you guys have been avid users of a tool like Clearco, but give me the journey of what's been kind of the financial segmentation of your business and how and when Clearco kind of came into existence for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about 2018, to say it's been a roller coaster is an understatement, right? I think we all can kind of agree to that. We're a home decor company, so we launched basically at the very end of 2018. So 2019 was our first full year. 2020 was our second. We grew 6x from 19 to 20 going into the pandemic. Everybody was, shelfie became a term, and we were perfect for a shelfie. Just the different vases and dry decor, et cetera, accents were absolutely perfectly suited for the pandemic. Coming out of the pandemic, of course, pretty challenging times. iOS 14.5 and everybody running out of the house and Taylor Swift concerts and everything else. So yeah, we had some challenging times in there. And we had an ownership change, so I took over the whole company in May of 2022.
Okay.
So one of the things that I was looking at was immediate profitability, because hey, I own this whole thing and I got to make it tick and make it run, and I'm not putting any more money into this thing. So pivot to profitability along with the whole rest of the industry. And we were lucky enough to already have 40,000 customers by that time.
That's
so
awesome.
It was somewhat easier, but still there's a revenue drop that went along with that because we weren't spending as much on the marketing side of the house. I didn't want to keep racking it up on the credit cards. Everything was my personal responsibility. When I went to a bank, maybe I could get like an SBA type of loan, but it always came with a pretty hefty personal guarantee. And I was like, look, if I can avoid that, I'd prefer that. So I started looking into alternative financing. I mean, if you use Shopify, obviously the sort of the easiest one is looking at a Shopify Advance. They make it pretty easy. It's on the dashboard. You just have to click the button, and it's probably in your account in two days. Look at it. I mean, we're talking to the D2C audience, and I certainly would encourage looking at that as a certain option.
Yeah.
But why I like Clearco, not that the guy is sitting right next to me or nothing, but
no pressure, right?
is it just offered really tidy relationship between my purchasing and my financial obligation. Like if it's a loose, here's $50K, use it how you please. Yeah. It doesn't associate itself exactly with that purchase. And specifically what I do, I mean, I'm importing things from India or Honduras or wherever around the globe, Tunisia, Morocco, et cetera. And I want to make sure that, I think we've all taken a trip abroad and go, wow, that's only $2. That's the equivalent of $2 here.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
why don't we all sell it? Well, it takes a lot to, get it. How much was your plane ticket to India? Okay. I mean, it costs a lot to get it back.
That's right.
So if you could put more into a container, and if you can buy more, then your cost of goods, obviously, per item of your unit cost goes down. And especially if it's a regular item. I mean, we sell our planters, we sell these vases from India. I mean, we know, we've been around 6 years. We pretty much know those items will sell out and how long they'll take to sell out. So when I approached Clearco with this exact information, it was like, this is a no-brainer for us. I happened to meet them at a conference. So it was literally that day. But I'm sure not everybody's experience is exactly like that.
Sure.
We pretty much got everything into the system, within actually 10 minutes, I'm going to have to say.
Wow, that's insane.
It was actually one of those dating sessions where it literally was.
Where there's like a clock on the wall.
There was a clock on the wall. There was a clock on the wall, and she had 10 minutes to get
That should be your
everything
guys'
in.
highlight reel.
And she did. And she's like, okay, it's all in. I mean, she was, of course, the account rep. And so she still had to put it through the finance process. But it was literally like 24 hours.
That's really cool.
And it was just such a coincidence because I had just put this PO in. The guy was ready to ship. And I was like, hold off. I might, send you the money a different way. And he goes, okay, no problem, no worries. And we were able to get him the money. And then in fact, he didn't even know the DHL just then, or the shipping rates just then. And so we had to wait a day. But then I put the shipping one in, and again, that was within 12 hours that he had that one. So I don't know, I'm a fan now.
Yeah, I love these stories. I love these stories because it just makes it, for me, it makes it so tangible.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Not only like the specifics of the situation, but also the value that we're delivering and the impact we have on your business.
I mean, because I guess I should have mentioned. I mean, these folks don't take credit cards. I mean, they don't really. I mean, they have a bank account.
That's
and
about all they have.
that's what they got.
So I'm curious, and you gave a great example of how you've used Clearco. I'd love if Ravi, you want to maybe talk through our process of how we order inventory. Let's go with how we order maybe burn. I'd love if you can kind of give us a perspective from how Clearco, at what part of the process you guys would come in and what part do you take over, and the benefit, if we can kind of bring that to fruition here, I think would be really cool. Another tangible example for listeners.
Yeah, basically deconstructing the whole process. Start to finish.
Yeah. So I'll let Ravi kind of give a process. Maybe you can give a couple examples, and then maybe you can deconstruct that for us.
Sure, yeah. So like if we take maybe the burn, we order that from a manufacturer in New Jersey. We have great terms with them, anywhere between like net 60, net 90. So they have about an 8-week lead time. The clock starts as soon as they ship to us. So I guess Clearco, would that possibly come in when the net 60, net 90 invoices then due?
So number one, our product, people use it primarily to fund inventory purchases and marketing spend, as well as fulfillment, freight, logistics, etc. So we can come in multiple places when you're putting an inventory order, and we can do it at the front end. We can put a deposit. We can help finance the deposit. We can finance the balance, or we can finance all of it, at the end. So there are multiple ways. What we need is really an invoice. And so the way the product works is, and this is a little bit different from how certain of our peers work, is we don't just give you a lump sum of cash. We underwrite you. We have an understanding of what capacity we're willing to give you. So we might say, well, we're comfortable advancing $100 to you, and you might say, okay, but I need this order from the supplier in New Jersey. It's not going to be $100. It's going to be $30, and I need to fund a deposit of $10 today. All you have to do is upload the invoice, and then we pay that invoice directly on your behalf. And so picking up on what Mike was saying, it makes it like a very discrete extension or advance, so that exactly, well, I just paid something, and now I'm paying for the capital. Capital always has a cost, but I'm not just getting a lump sum of cash. And then maybe I don't know exactly what I want to do with it, or I don't know when I'm going to deploy it. But whether it's inventory or whether it's marketing spend, there are different ways and different points in that billing cycle that we can get involved.
Yeah, and then I'm sure you guys, what kind of terms do you guys offer typically on the invoice financing?
So invoice funding, our product is 4, 5, or 6 month tenor. So, and you pay it back ratably. So if you take that $100 example, just say you funded all of that $100, say across 10 invoices of $10 each, all on one day.
Yeah.
We'll charge you a fee, and the fees can vary, and then you'll pay us back over 4 or 5 or 6 months, and you'll pay us back ratably.
Yeah.
Meaning you'll pay us an equal installment every week. And that's also a very important difference between us and some of our peers, is that traditional revenue-based finance has you paying a percentage of your revenue usually on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So there's a daily remittance rate, and what we found is it makes planning hard sometimes for businesses.
Yeah.
So
you have a great month, and then you just end up owing so much of that.
That's the biggest thing. So the thing that we hear again and again, especially this time of year, is that someone will take an advance with that daily remittance rate versus our fixed payback amount, and then they're having a fantastic fall. Revenues are going like this, and all the cash is leaving the business to pay back the capital provider. And by the way, when they charge you the fee, they do it based on an estimated time to repayment or tenor of the product. So if they might say in August, they might say, yeah, it should be about 6 month tenor. And then your revenues go like this, and they're taking more and more of your revenue out, and then it's a 3 month product, but the fee doesn't change.
Yes,
it's not like they rebate you the fee.
Don't dare do the APR on that. Right? I mean, loan shark. Anybody? I mean, seriously.
I've heard some crazy numbers, like ones that are getting in like the 30s, 40s, 50s. I'm like,
easily,
that's
easily.
insanity.
Oh yeah, sure, of course.
Insanity.
I mean, just to piggyback on the point of layering it out 4 to 6 months, which is about the time that those items might sit in inventory.
Sure. Yeah.
And then the other thing is just not to get too lost in the math, otherwise I'll get lost. But I mean, if something costs 100, like you sell it for 100, but you buy it for 20, but then the shipping also costs another 10, so it's 30, but then we sell it wholesale. So some of them are 50% off, and some of them are retail, which are full price, but usually the full price is 15 to 20% off anyway.
Right.
But then I know very, very clearly, no pun intended, but I mean, what is the finance for that piece? And I know it might be 5, maybe 5, out of that, but I know, otherwise I wouldn't have had that piece of business.
Of course.
I wouldn't have had the 100 in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. The way we think about the capital we provide is that it's fuel for growth.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the best consumers of the capital are the ones that know exactly, if I use the fuel, I'm going to get this.
Yeah.
So if they're buying inventory, they know their COGS very well. They know how quickly they turn their inventory. And so they can model, okay, this is the return if I make this investment, and then this is the cost of the capital, whether it's Clearco or any other provider, they understand this is the cost of the capital, and I'm comparing it against this return on the investment. And so that's also true of marketing spend too. You look at ROAS and you figure out, okay, this is my ROAS if I'm taking capital at this cost from Clearco or anyone else.
Yeah.
And so theoretically, then it's unlimited.
Yeah, well, if you turn it,
if you knew the demand well enough,
if you turn
that's
it,
a little
if you
secret.
turn it quickly and you sell where you think you're going to sell,
Sure,
or your
revolves.
marketing spend generates the revenue that you expect it will, then it can be an accelerant for growth, and that's how we think of ourselves. Again, the business owner has to understand all these dynamics, and they have to be very close to their business and very close to their finances. But if they can make those kinds of judgments, then we're the path to very rapid growth, and that's what we want to be. We want to see businesses grow. We want to see businesses get profitable and start to generate free cash flow, so that at some point they can self-finance, or like sometimes, and this is fine, they outgrow us, and then they're getting an asset-based loan from a brick and mortar bank that wouldn't have financed them, and certainly could never have financed them in 24 hours in the old days. So like we view ourselves as part of this diverse landscape of financing sources, and we think we have a very important critical role to play, but there are lots of other parties involved in this for different points in your life as you're growing.
No, I mean, you guys fit like the key demographic of just like early stage startups that can't get a traditional line of credit or an ABL at that cheaper cost of capital. And I think even like we have great terms. We're lucky to be able to have like such good partnerships with our manufacturers. But even let's say it was like pay to ship on our inventory. And even if we didn't have net 30 on our meta, your 4 to 6 month terms allows people to put their inventory and ad spend into negative cash conversion cycles without even having those natural terms.
Correct.
So that's like the perfect, kind of what you were saying, like the 4 to 6 month term, that's like the perfect amount of time that people need, like startups need, to kind of sell through that inventory and make a return on their ad spend.
Absolutely. And I think also when you're making investments in these inventory or marketing spend, you're giving very careful thought to the conversion cycle. That's like the most critical part of it. Yeah. And we like to help our customers think through that, because it is so important vis-a-vis the cost of the capital they're taking. And it enables them, like sometimes what we see is they'll make payments to inventory suppliers, and because they're working, like they're getting them dollars early, they're getting them dollars on time using our capital, that their terms can actually improve, right? So the inventory supplier is saying, oh, okay, these guys are they're a real counterparty to me, and I can improve terms. And then it just becomes this virtuous cycle.
Or even just getting a lower cost per unit just by able to buy more at that time.
Correct. Yeah, it's all critical.
Yeah.
Or just the shipping aspect. Yeah. I mean, and it depends on where you're bringing it in from, but especially with the container versus less container. I mean, it's just such a huge difference from a unit cost.
We hear customers say that all the time, by the way.
Yeah.
Less than a container, and then our financing enables them to not do that.
It's right.
Huge. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest piece, and I think part of it is breaking past the stigma of where financing and even fintech has kind of boiled down to a little bit, right? Which is like, oh, like that's going to be a lot of fees, or, oh, that's going to be too expensive, or, and it's like, I mean, I go to, 5 to 10 different founder dinners a month, and bring up even just in conversation, like, hey, like I see, you've pulled back on spending this and that. Have you just considered getting funding through, a Clearco or a few of your counterparts out there? And again, the founder that isn't as dialed in to their financing will always answer like, no, we just don't want to pay the fees.
Sure.
And like, I'm at that point, you're kind of looking at it like, well, are you looking at all the potential benefits that can come out of a fee?
Yep.
A fee has just been a word that's been stigmatized as bad, but a fee can unlock a lot of things and you guys just covered it bang, bang, bang right now, which is like, wait, I'm able to get better terms. I can get better shipping. I can order more. I can order in time, and I can pay on time so people see I have better credit. Like, you have so many unlocks that can happen. And then when you boil down the fee, it's like you're actually paying the price to unlock some of these things.
Sure.
Yeah. And so I'd love if you have like, other examples of this, or just like even more than an example, like if the business founder, which I think is actually, unfortunately, a high majority of our listeners, the business founder that is not super dialed into their finances and maybe even their operational cycle and understanding the way they work together, what's something you challenge them to do and understand better to see why this would be an option?
Yep. So I think on the fee piece, it's exactly as you describe it. Sometimes people have a visceral reaction to the fee. Revenue-based finance for DTC e-coms, it's not the cheapest capital out there. Everyone understands that. But there's a reason it's not cheap. We turn in 24 hours, right? You give us your documentation, you connect your revenue accounts, we can give you funding in 24 hours. There's no bank that can do that. Very few banks, traditional brick and mortar banks, are comfortable with startup DTC e-coms. They don't understand their business, the specific vertical they might be in, or the DTC e-com business model in general, so hard to get funding. We're not asking you for personal guarantees, as you mentioned. We're not asking you for liens on your assets. So to me, like the visceral reaction to fees is not something that is really rooted in fact and analysis. And so what we like to do with our customers, whether they're expressing concern over our fees or asking questions about our fees or not, we want them to say, okay, just the analysis we were talking about earlier. You want to grow your business? This is one way to do it. This is a way to accelerate growth. We give you this capital. This is what it will cost you. This is the amount we will give you. This is how it will pay back. And what you need to do is you need to layer all of that into a model, right? A financial model. It doesn't have to be ultra sophisticated. I'm not talking about 3-statement integrated models with complicated logic. I'm saying a P&L, a balance sheet, and you understand if I make this investment and I turn inventory this quickly, or I make this ad spend, and it gets me this revenue, is the capital productive?
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yep.
And you may come to the conclusion where, it is too expensive for me right now.
Sure.
And maybe I need to drive other efficiencies in my business before I can do that. Or maybe I'm going to raise a little bit more equity capital before I start tapping higher cash cost, revenue-based finance. But to us, what we want to do is we want to support our customers in understanding that kind of math. We have a sales team. Mike's met them. We have account executives or reps, but we also have people that are basically credit engineers or sales engineers. Like in the SaaS world, they're product engineers or sales engineers that come on. And they work with the AEs, our account executives, and they have detailed financial knowledge, and they'll model things for our customers. They're like, just tell me how you turn your inventory. Tell me what your cost of goods sold is. I'll model this for you. I'll send it to you, and we can talk through it, and you can understand exactly the cost of our capital versus the return on investment and how productive it will be for your business.
Actually, take advantage of that service.
I think that's
no idea.
That's a perfect way to put it. Is like the fee is really just an investment, and what's your return on that after you get that? Yeah.
It doesn't have to be emotional, is my point of view. Like I don't want to sound like a robot, but it's kind of dollars and cents. Capital is not free. It shouldn't be free anywhere. It isn't free.
Right.
Equity capital is the most expensive capital. A lot of our customers, they can't access a traditional asset-based loan at a traditional bank. So if they want to grow their business and they need capital, they have to look to alternative sources. We're one of those sources. There's a cost to our capital. That cost considers how quickly we underwrite. That cost considers our loss rates. We have our own cost of capital, which people don't really understand, which means I'm not a bank. I don't take deposits. So I can't take deposits from retail bank consumers and then deploy it in my business. I have my own financing counterparties. So my cost of capital also is part of the math. And so it sounds complicated, but in the end, does the capital that you're taking from us at the cost we require or we charge, does it help you grow your business profitably or intelligently?
Well, I just want to add something to it, because something we haven't brought up at all yet is timing. Yet we're in July, August right now.
Good point.
And for home, that's a really slow time. I mean, usually
As
it's
it
a
is for
homemaker.
weight loss,
I mean, everybody's on vacation, nobody's thinking about their home, that sort of thing. So our revenues are probably the lowest of the year. Having said that, because we buy from overseas in 90, 120 days. What is in 90 to 120? Anybody know
Black
in the
Friday.
retail business? I mean, we're all gearing up for Black Friday, Cyber Monday right now, right? And so I actually have a PO that I'm just about to put in to Clearco, maybe even today,
Let's do it right now.
Let's just do it. Let's see the whole process. So we can stock up.
That's awesome.
But we just don't have that capital right now.
Can you walk us, if you don't mind, let's say it's today or tomorrow, whenever it is.
Right.
Walk us through what that cycle looks for you now. So it's August 29th. So let's call it September.
It's
You're
almost
obviously
too late
gearing
for
up.
some.
You're gearing up
Right?
for Black Friday. What is you putting this into Clearco? What is this going to open up for you?
Yeah, for Bloomist, November is, maybe 3x. What we'll see in maybe the average month, right? Q4 is about 2+X, right? And I'm sure that's the same for a lot of direct to consumers. I mean, home isn't what you necessarily think of as a gifting business necessarily, although we do have some plants and some things that are more giftable than other things. But people really get their homes ready. We have 3,500 interior design clients, right? And you might think, well, what the heck does that have to do with holiday? Everything, okay? And in fact, our biggest time of year could be end of October, beginning of November, because people want to get their house ready for Thanksgiving, especially post-pandemic, because we just really didn't have a lot of get-togethers and gatherings, and so it's just been these last couple of years where people are like really appreciating it a lot more, right? And getting together, but then people are like, Can I say the S word now?
Yeah. This is the perfect time. This is the perfect time.
I gotta get my shit together, right? I mean, I gotta get my house together, right? I'm having 10 people over for Thanksgiving,
true.
The in-laws are coming over, right? And I mean, we haven't had people over, right? And so, and how about that interior design friend that we have from, Westport or whatever, Let's bring her in and buy some new pillows or whatever it is. So you got to be ready for that. I mean, and ours comes even a little bit earlier sometimes than Black Friday, and so we need to have the inventory there. And if we don't have that inventory, I mean, inventory planning, I'm sure, is just a complete other podcast, that you can certainly have, and the tools that are out there to make sure that you have what you're supposed to have, because that's something I've been studying a lot lately. But once you have that in place, and you have the PO ready, the Clearco is there. And I just saw it yesterday. I mean, my dashboard there, and I got availability, apparently.
Good. Grab it. You can move fast.
Yeah.
But I think you're touching on a really important part of your business and our business too, which is seasonality.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we can move very quickly is because we rely on fairly sophisticated machine learning models. And we were actually just having a conversation this morning before I drove down on seasonality and how do we best reflect what we know will be an incredibly busy fall for many of our customers. So we're always thinking of ways to optimize or improve our machine learning models and our algorithms to actually foresee and give customers credit for what we know will be their busiest time of years. You have to be thoughtful about this stuff, and you have to understand, okay, what does the revenue environment macroeconomically for these businesses look like? But we compete with other providers, and we want to make sure if a customer comes to us and they're like, listen, this is it. This is like I deploy in July and August into inventory and marketing spend in the fall, and so I'm going to ask you for a lot. And our models and our underwriting team, they have to make really good judgments about that kind of seasonality so we can best support our customers.
Yep.
And it's very, very common. What you're describing in your business is really what we see in the bulk of our businesses. Sometimes we have counter-cyclical businesses. Could be someone who makes sun umbrellas, right? And you see them investing very heavily in early spring or mid-spring. But bulk of our customers, they're selling Black Friday, Cyber Monday.
Right. Makes sense. I'm curious. We talked a lot about why and when to look into invoice funding, and especially with Clearco. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the maybe pros and cons, but more on the con side. Are there things where brands or founders should look out for where maybe invoice funding is not a fit, or where the product in itself is maybe more is better fit for a certain maturity of a brand? Can you maybe touch on if there are any call outs there?
Yeah, so I think the invoice funding product is a great fit for the things that we've been discussing, which is inventory, marketing spend, fulfillment, logistics. That's where it works really well. We have this conversation all the time with our customers where they say, well, this is the use of the capital. Is this the appropriate use? And sometimes they're like, I need to pay my rent. That's not what Clearco does. We don't pay people's rent. But they also might be saying, well, I need to make an investment in a manufacturing facility, or a piece of equipment, or a new product line. And that's when you start to think, well, does this really work with a 4 or 5 or 6 month tenor product? Not well. And then for large investments like a new product line, maybe you're raising equity, and we see that often, where we'll have customers who are growing very rapidly. They're using us aggressively, right? We're deploying a lot of capital into the credits, and then they say, well, now we want to do something different. We want to pivot the business, or we want to add this line to the business. And that often is a strategic investment or an equity investment. Maybe it's a follow-on round from their existing investors, or maybe they're raising altogether new capital from other equity investors. We have one very good example of a customer that makes hats and T-shirts, and they just made their, I think they just made their millionth hat.
Wow.
And they are a little bit different in that they actually have a lot of capital investment because they use machines to make the hats and to embroider the hats. And so they're not relying on overseas vendors. I mean, maybe for the hats themselves, but not to embroider them and stitch them. And so these machines, which I've seen, they're sophisticated and they're expensive. And so the way they think about us is they say, okay, I have a bank that will fund capital equipment purchases. And that's what I like to use that bank for. But when it comes to marketing spend, I use Clearco. And they just think of us as like two different financing sources. It's a very thoughtful, logical way to think about it. And the guy is a very bright guy. He's like, well, I don't want to mix them. And you guys have a key role to help us when it comes to marketing spend. But if I'm buying capital equipment, I'm going to go to a traditional equipment finance counterparty or a local bank. And they don't like to mix the two. And then the other thing they like to remind us is we don't file UCCs, and UCCs are effectively liens on assets.
So you can sit behind senior lenders then?
Correct.
Okay, that's
correct. So which is not also well understood.
Yeah.
No personal guarantee.
Let's talk about that, by the way, because maybe a lot of people won't understand what a senior lender is or what a UCC
Sure,
is.
yeah, of course. Right, so you can think of Clearco as an unsecured product. And what that means is we're usually last in line if something goes wrong. We're ahead of equity. We're ahead of equity. But we're usually last in line behind other traditional lenders who might be asking for a personal guarantee, who might have security interests in your business, which means in the example I gave you, the financing counterparty, they finance that piece of capital equipment. But if something goes wrong and the business falls away, just melts, they have access to recovery by taking control and prosecuting a lien that they have on that asset. So Clearco's not asking for any of that. But sometimes a business might, we will come in to fund marketing spend for that company that I mentioned earlier, and they want to know that when this guy does his work and does his research, he's not going to find a lien from us on it. So it's a very specific example, but we're not filing UCCs on new customers. That's clearly a key differentiator for us. We're not a secured lender. We're just not. And then of course that goes back to our discussion of cost of capital, right? Because if we're last in line, likely that our cost of capital will be more expensive than, say, the bank that's financing the purchase of that equipment.
Right. Yeah. So oftentimes, like even in our position, businesses might not fully mature past your stage. It might actually be that kind of middle stage where they have a traditional line from like an ABL even, and just use you as an extra source of capital if needed.
Yeah. So we see it happen in a bunch of different ways. First of all, there's a large swath of our customers who cannot get access to a traditional bank line. You and I were talking about that earlier. You've got to be, you have to have been in business for a while. You have to be performing well, profitable maybe, generating free cash flow.
A lot of D2C businesses don't have sizable inventory or AR.
Right, so it's not worth the bank's time or energy to put in a traditional ABL. So they'll rely on us for all their financing needs when it comes to inventory, marketing spend, et cetera. Over time, they may grow. And so in instances, with a lot of our customers, there is a senior lender. It's a more traditional ABL lender, and we coexist with them. There are certain ABL lenders that are less excited about us being in the company's capital structure. But then there are others who understand how the customer uses us. They have confidence in the way the customer uses us, and hence they're like very comfortable with that. And you'd be surprised, like sometimes it could be a very small bank that's less comfortable with us, and it could be a Bank of America or a Truist or a JP Morgan that understands, like they look at us and like, yeah, I understand, that's revenue-based finance. That's how you finance your working capital. I'm totally comfortable with that. We love to think that we work well with other lenders and other debt providers, whereas some of our peers, one of which we were discussing earlier, they don't want anyone else. Like if you go to them, they're going to exclude anyone else from funding, and then you become at risk because you're relying on a single debt provider or capital provider.
You've mentioned it a little bit, but you guys aren't the only ones providing something in this sector. And obviously, when it comes to brands, we're always all exploring options and whatnot. Talk through maybe the 2-3 reasons or 2-3 things that really stand out on a Clearco end versus the 2 or 3 other closest options.
Sure.
And what makes you guys kind of like that almost no-brainer choice, although I know in this sector, you kind of have to explore to understand no-brainer.
Yeah, like I view it as any responsible customer or business owner should be exploring a range of options, right? If your boss came to you and they said, "All right, you run finance," and you said, "Yeah, I just talked to one guy," he might be unhappy with you. Right? So there again, it's this wide landscape of providers. What we think we do well is we move extremely quickly, and we don't give you just a lump sum of cash. That model in revenue-based finance is called cash in bank. And so again, it's the $100 example. We underwrite you, we tell you we can extend $100 to you, and then I just push it across the table. You start paying us that day. The cost of capital hits like that. It's not about when you deploy it. You could be sitting there with $100 in your bank account, and we're already you're paying a fee on that, and then B, we're remitting you daily, right? Not us, but like our peers. So for us, we don't give you that lump sum of cash. It's tied to a productive, specific use of capital. It's a discrete advance tied to a discrete invoice. And our customers love that. And then the other thing they love is it's not that daily remittance rate, which is taking a percentage of your revenues, which could be a lot of cash during the fall or during Black Friday, Cyber Monday. The payback is fixed. So and the owners...
Can you adjust that ever at any point? If you're at 4, can you go to 10 within that same...
Change tenors? No, it's hard to do. We would refinance it, or as you paid down the 4, we would give you additional capacity that you could deploy into a 6. The interesting thing about the product is I mentioned that 4, 5, or 6 month tenor. If you go back to the $100 of capacity example, you could upload an invoice on one day for $20 and you could pick 4 months. And then a couple of weeks could pass. And you might upload the next invoice for $50, and you could say, well, I understand how my inventory is going to turn, when I'm going to get it, what it's going to generate for me in sales, and I want more time. So that second invoice, even though it's still part of the 100, you could do that at 6 months. So it's very dynamic, and the beauty of that is, our customers can plan, and they can plan more intelligently and easily. Because they know exactly if I do 4, if I do 5, if I do 6 for this invoice amount, this is the amount that I'll pay back every week. It's clear as day. We value transparency with our customers enormously. There are no hidden fees. We tell you exactly if I give you that $100 and you deploy it all at once and you upload $100 of invoices, this is the fee. That is the only fee. There is no unused line fee. There's nothing. It's just, and like I think, we were talking about at the outset, like this landscape, which is sometimes dizzying. You can make it more dizzying by hiding fees, right? If you're a capital provider. And so we always feel like that doesn't serve the customer well. And if you're not serving the customer well, or you're not being really forthright with them, you're making it harder for them to run their business.
I agree.
Let me ask a follow-up on that, because I'm just kind of curious, understanding the textile industry. I mean, there's always factoring as a type of thing, and that's been around for 100 years. But I think with direct to consumer, why it's a little different is that was always based on invoices to a retailer. So I'm a wholesaler, or I'm a manufacturer, and of course we didn't really, I mean, I guess there was mail order back in the day, but I mean, like generally speaking, it was to a retailer, and then it was factored, and that's as old as whatever. But I mean, you're basically the same, but you allow it from a direct consumer perspective. I just think of it as like it's a little bit different than factoring, and we don't, like when we're underwriting businesses and when we're extending capital to businesses, we're doing it based on their DTC business, right? So we're funding their direct-to-consumer business. If they have wholesale business or retail business, we may weight it in our underwriting, but what we're really focused on is the DTC piece. And sometimes our customers, they may finance that part of the business, but then they may factor receivables using another factor, a more traditional factor.
A more traditional factor. But again, it all comes back to the same thing that we were talking about. It's math. And it's terms. And so you just have to sit down and figure out, okay, what is the most efficient or productive way to fund this part of my business and this activity in my business?
That's great points. One thing before we come to a wrap up here, I want to, and I'm very curious if you had any inputs here too, Mike, but when it comes to the laundry list of maybe hesitations that come from founders, right? I mentioned one, which is every dinner I go to, a person mentions, I don't want to do those fees. I don't want to handle those fees. And I'm sure you have a great team of AEs and stuff. They've gotten their share of different reasons why someone wouldn't, let's break it into different sectors. Like 1, maybe use Clearco, 2, maybe use invoice funding, or 3, just financing period, right? Can you maybe point out some of those, like, I don't want to call them, myths, or like, just kind of made up hesitations, but there are ones that seem to be kind of like more emotional than it is, actual practical. So, and I'm curious if you had any before you chose to move in with the Clearco. What are some of those other ones besides the usual ones of, I don't want to pay fees?
I mean, to start off, yeah, I certainly have looked at and used and evaluated, probably 8 to 10 different companies out there. There are other ones. And I have used Shopify. I've used a couple of others, the lump sum ones. Yep. Like I said earlier, I really like the clean connection with the invoice, but there's a couple of others actually that did do that, but they just took so long. They kept doing more and more due diligence and asking me for some paper from we have a Delaware company. Yeah. Okay, here's the paper. Okay, do you have something else? This, we have a very old that we still have like an SBA, yep. UCC from COVID day. We're paying off. We're all good, but like, what's that all about? Yeah. It was just so much. I just appreciated that. But I think the key thing is, and I'm happy to help anybody else on this podcast want to reach out, whatever. I open up a spreadsheet or a Google sheet, whatever it is, and I just start plugging it in right away. Here's the deal. Here's what I want to buy. Here's what I expect to get out of it. And it's not just the retail price of that vase. It's like I sell it wholesale. I sell it for a discount. I sell it 20% off on Black Friday. What's the blended revenue that I think I'm going to bring in from those particular items. What's the shipping? Got to have it fully loaded, and then just load in that Clearco, fee. And, you got to put it in there. Yep. And then if you're still making, 20% on the bottom after all of that, right? Then you could just keep doing that over and over again theoretically. So if you're giving me the 100 and I keep making 20, why wouldn't I just do that all day long?
Sure, of course you would.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the thing I would say is that our product or revenue-based finance, sometimes people view it as opaque and they don't really understand the fees. And I think that we've tried to strip away all of that through our product structure. I think it's much harder when you have this daily remittance rate, which is a percentage of revenues, because then the tenor, you don't really know what the tenor of the advance is going to be. It could be one half. It could be one half of what the provider told you.
Ravi, anything else to add on your end when you're like some hesitations you've had when we've considered some of these tools and even going this route?
Yeah, across the board, every lender has different types of fee structures, and to what we were talking about before, it can all be hidden. So the way I evaluate the right lender for us is basically getting the entire, from the term sheet, basically getting the entire fee structure of that amount that we'll be borrowing, and literally modeling out like, okay, if we borrowed $1 million from this lender, what are all of the fees combined going to be hitting our monthly P&L? Yep. And that's the way I evaluate what the most cheapest cost of capital for us is, right? Another thing I'll mention though is that cheapest cost of capital isn't always the best thing. A lot of lenders that may offer the cheapest might not be able to grow with you at the same pace that other lenders who are a little bit more flexible but a little bit more costly are willing to grow with you. Yep. So that's something I've definitely noticed too. And I think those are probably the two biggest things. Just getting really dialed in on what those finance fees are.
Two things. I think the fixation on the lowest cost of capital can be your undoing. Yes. If you're a founder or an owner. So it's not an unnatural way to think about it. You might just say, that seems so expensive and this guy's cheaper. But he's cheaper for a reason, and this guy is more expensive for a reason. Often the more expensive guy has a lot more flexibility, right? So this working capital provider can give you a lot more flexibility in a bunch of different ways. So I think that that's key. And then the other thing which you started your comments with, which is how you do it, like just sitting down, modeling it, having a P&L that's dynamic and loading in a bunch of different financing options, that's music to our ears. Like when we hear customers say that's how we approach it, that means they're thoughtful, careful customers who plan intelligently, and those are the customers that we want because it makes them more credit worthy.
Correct.
It makes it more likely that they're going to return the capital that they take from us.
Yeah.
I think we unpacked a lot on this episode. I feel like we have to do a part 2 because this is
definitely
really, really valuable. But one thing we like to do at the end of each episode, and Mike, we'll start with you. There's a lot of listeners, as we told you guys, ranging from starting their brand all the way up to building 9-figure brands. If there's one takeaway, one thing that you want them to go and apply or work on their business after listening to this episode, or something you've been able to gain access to knowledge base wise, what's that one takeaway for them to chew on?
Wow, there's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's a lot to unpack, like you said. And I don't know, there's a big buffet, and it's like, do I just take the shrimp or the crab legs? I mean, what do you do?
You're on
here?
your last serving.
I mean, one thing I've really been looking a lot at, and it's just so hard to solve for, is this inventory planning tool and the marketing planning tool, right? How much do I spend? Where do I spend this stuff? And how much of what do I buy? And as a D2C who has inventory, I mean, I think that's the biggest challenge for all of us. But I will say it's getting better and better for us, especially since we've gone through these challenging times, honestly. And people are getting more savvy to the whole process, that there's some really interesting low-cost inventory planning tools now that I've been using, and they're amazing. And more lower-cost marketing planning tools in terms of being able to balance those, what do you spend on TikTok? What do you spend on, each of the new and different channels that you have?
Yep.
And then that all leads to better business practices, which allows you to get more money with Clearco because, as you said, I mean, I'm a founder who theoretically knows what I'm doing, right, with those tools. So I guess the takeaway is like, just keep at it with those two elements of your business, which are the kind of key critical elements of what you're doing.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, and you've heard me say it multiple times, but I'm going to say it again: plan ahead and plan thoughtfully, because if you do that, you'll give yourself the time and the room to figure out exactly what capital you need, why you need it, what cost of capital you're willing to pay, and that'll put you in the best position to do what you're trying to do, which is to grow your business and get the profitability. So Clearco, we love to be transparent with our customers. We view it as one of our key values. Part of that transparency is helping people understand, you take this capital, how will you deploy it? Can we help you understand how you'll deploy it best? That's critical to us, because in the end, and I say this all the time, like the go-go days of 20, 21, 22, they're behind us. All businesses have to be sustainable, and that's true for Clearco too. And sustainability for us means when we send capital out, it has to come back to us. And so what we want customers that are very well educated, very thoughtful, who plan ahead, and we love to help them do all of that because it makes them a better customer for Clearco. And when capital comes back to us, then we can give it to another customer, deploy it again, and support someone's growth.
It's amazing. Well, chew on that.
If you want more from us, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, and check out the website chewonthis.io.